Homily for the fourth Sunday of Lent, Year A. I am the light of the world. Our readings for this Sunday are from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1 and 6 to 7, as well as 10 to 13. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8 to 14, and the Gospel of St. John chapter 9, verse 1 to 41. Jesus is the light of the world, and he demonstrates this by giving sight to the man born blind in today's gospel. Like Jesus, we should see the suffering of others as an opportunity for us to serve, to care, and to show God's love and compassion. Evil is real in the world. Suffering and pain are real. The best response to them is to go and do something good, to take some action that can relieve the suffering or remedy the situation. The dynamics of spiritual blindness. Blindness is a painful affliction. To be blind is to lose one's vision and dwell in pitch darkness. One is unable to see the beauty of things, to recognize human faces, to distinguish between white and black, and to differentiate between day and night. To be blind is to live in isolation, to be alienated in some way from one's environment, and to be liable to stumbling and falling. Blindness can, however, be found on two levels, physical and spiritual. There is the blindness of the eye, which is on the physical level. There is also the blindness of the mind, the blindness of the heart, the blindness of the spirit, which is on the spiritual level. Of the two, the latter is deadlier and takes many forms. It manifests in the selfishness that prevents us from recognizing the need of others. It manifests in the materialism that blinds us from spiritual values. It manifests in the pride that blinds us to our own faults. And it manifests in the insensitivity that blinds us to the hurts we are causing others. Yes, spiritual blindness manifests in the prejudice that blinds us to the truth about others, and in the lust that blinds us to the true meaning and purpose of our bodies. This affliction is best described as the darkness of the heart, and it is the darkest night of all. We see in the gospel that the Pharisees suffered from the blindness of the spirit so much that they refused to accept Jesus as the Messiah, despite the various prophecies that were manifested in his life and teaching. The man born blind, however, was simply afflicted by physical blindness. His heart was full of illumination, which made him disposed to receiving a miracle from Jesus. So while the Pharisees grew more blind, the man born blind grew in insight and was able to identify and proclaim Jesus as a prophet. He got healed physically, but he got much more from Jesus. He got healed spiritually also. At the end of the story, the man said, "Lord, I believe." As a result, he experienced a transformation from blindness to sight, from darkness to light, and from unbelief to faith. His encounter with Jesus led him to faith, worship, and witness. Every genuine encounter with Jesus Christ still produces the same results even today. Every Christian should daily pray for such an encounter. God's care and goodness on display. In an environment where sickness and suffering were seen as God's punishment for sin, the apostles were confronted with the case of the man born blind. They turned to Jesus in their dilemma, but Jesus rejected the direct connection between suffering and sin. He refuted the assertion that the man's blindness was a punishment from God, because God does not do evil. God only does good. Jesus went on to explain that the man's condition is an opportunity to show the goodness of God. Thus, by healing the blind man, Jesus revealed something about God's work. he showed God's sensitivity and compassion in the face of suffering. While the apostles were busy speculating and engaging in all kinds of controversy about the source of the man's problem, Jesus went straight into action. And in this way, he teaches us to do something about human suffering and pain instead of wasting time and energy speculating and philosophizing over an incident of suffering. There is always something every one of us can do to alleviate another's suffering. Simply talking about a problem will never solve it. Only action will. It is better to light a candle than to cause the darkness. The tragedy and irony of ignorance. To see well, good eyesight is not enough. The greatest tragedy is not to be born blind, but to have eyes and fail to see. Worse still is to have eyes and refuse to see, like the Pharisees, who had perfect eyesight and yet were terribly blind and could not recognize the works of God in Jesus. It is quite ironical that while the one who was physically blind got back his sight, saw clearly and believed, the Pharisees who were physically sighted could not see, or better still, they refused to see. This situation is caused by sin, the sin of pride, arrogance, and presumption. The Pharisees were proud, unyielding, devious, evasive, and blind, yet they did not know how blind they were. Their ignorance in this regard put them into further trouble with Jesus Christ, who tells them that their punishment would have been less if they had acknowledged that they were blind, but that since they insist that they see, their guilt is much more. John chapter 9 verse 41. Not only did they reject the powerful light Jesus sheds, but they also wanted to prevent others from seeing it. They rejected the light of Christ because it exposed the lie they had lived all the while. From encounter to discipleship. We live in a terribly confused world where darkness pretends to be the light, where ignorance believes itself to be knowledge, where pride thinks of itself as humility and blindness sees itself as sight. In such a world, powerful agents of darkness constantly put up a strident fight against the light, but they will not succeed. See John chapter 1 verse 4 to 5, John chapter 8 verse 12. For the Christian, the only way to ensure victory repeatedly is to always yearn for a true encounter with Jesus, the light of the world. Because when this encounter happens, we become completely transformed. As in the case of the Samaritan woman at the well, the blind man had a powerful encounter with Jesus and he was transformed forever. Following the powerful encounter, the man became a believer in, a disciple of, and a witness to the Lordship of Jesus. He became a missionary. The blind man's experience buttresses the point that to become a true witness of Jesus, we need a certain kind of faith experience, often called an encounter. Christianity is about knowing and following the person of Jesus Christ, not knowing and following a book, an idea, or even a set of doctrines. All that a book, an idea, or a set of doctrines can do is to help reveal Jesus to us and help us to get to know Him. Our challenge is to imitate Him as our model and bear witness to Him. Thus, at the heart of the controversy over the healing of the man born blind in John's Gospel is the distinction between light and darkness, truth and error, sight and blindness, innocence and guilt, holiness and sin. We learn that there are many forms of blindness and that blindness afflicts the human being on much deeper levels than just the loss of physical sight. Only in Jesus Christ, the light of the world, can we find total healing and transformation at all levels. God bless you.